Okay, so I know 3 million plus documents dropped by the DOJ last Friday with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. I gotta believe, and I'm sure you share my sentiment, there's millions of documents we're never gonna be able to see. We know that they've been redacting Trump's name, they've been pulling documents. I mean, it's just a fucking zoo. But there's one particular angle I wanted to focus on, and it deals with a guy by the name of Brad Karp, K-A-R-P, and he's the head of this mega law firm called Paul Weiss. And if that name sounds familiar and you're not a lawyer, it's because we're going to rewind the hands of time a little bit and go back to last year. As we know, Donald Trump got into office in January of 2025, right? And then right after that, do you remember he started with that whole slew of executive orders where he basically threatened all of these big law firms. And he said, look, I'm coming after you. I'm going to pull your national security clearances. I'm going to, sick the DOJ on you, whatever. And the very first of these mega law firms to capitulate was Paul Weiss. So let's bring up the executive order. Now, this one was dated March 14th, 2025. And it says addressing risks from Paul Weiss. And it specifically identified the firm, Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, a firm that's been around for 100 years or something like that. And in it, it was very obvious that Trump was targeting this firm. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this back up to you is the date was March 14th, 2025. And wouldn't you know it, just, 9 days later, not even 2 full weeks, March 23rd, 2025, an email was sent out from Brad Karp. He's the head of this mega international law firm, Paul Weiss. And it was sent to everybody who works at Paul Weiss in all of the offices. And the subject was Statement to the PW Community. PW standing for Paul Weiss. And he basically made excuses. He said, yeah, we've been around for more than 150 years, but our firm was facing a, quote, existential crisis. And so to make a long story short, we capitulated. And how did they capitulate, folks? Well, not only did they say that they would allow there to be reform to their DEI programs and policies, and pretty much conceding that they had been doing something illegal, which they had not been doing. But in order to sit there and kiss the ass of the Trump administration, they said they were doing that. But then they also promised to give $10 million worth of pro bono to the Trump administration's priorities, what they thought were priorities over the next 4 years. I'm not talking 10 million over 4 years. I'm talking 10 million each year. Now look, the billable rates at Paul Weiss are pretty high, but $40 million in pro bono, that's bullshit, right? They ain't giving the pro bono to you, right? I don't see them stepping up and representing Liam Ramos and his dad or Kilmar Abrego Garcia. No. And the problem I have with this is that with Paul Weiss being the first to capitulate, it was the first of many of the big white shoe law firms that capitulated. They bent the knee and they sent a message to Trump, this administration, and to all of these fucking MAGA cronies that they were too scared to take a stand. Even though they had the history, credibility, integrity, and financial wherewithal to withstand the storm, they folded so damn fast like a cheap, wet piece of paper. And understandably so, and justifiably so, Brad Karp was fucking dragged for what he did. Dragged. I'm going to bring up something that was in Bloomberg Law. It was from November of 2025. And Brad Karp ends up going to this event in New York. It was the anniversary gala for an organization called the New York Bar Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of the New York State Bar Association. And he rolls up to this black tie function. And when he's rolling up to this black tie function, there's protesters standing outside of the event. And they're holding signs identifying Paul Weiss and they're identifying Trump. And they're basically saying, how dare you capitulate, right? How dare you and these big law firms bend the knee to Trump? And then Karp actually is a speaker. And here's where it gets really interesting, right? So Karp gets up and is speaking in real time for like 30 minutes. And according to Bloomberg, as he's speaking, a heckler starts heckling him. Now listen to this. Karp started talking about the record number of pro bono hours that they had done this year, as in 2025. Pro bono for whom? For Trump or for other people? The heckler would say, for Trump? Oh my gosh. Okay. Like I just did. And Karp would say, we've done XYZ in our pro bono work. And the heckler would say, for Trump? So it had this kind of rhythmic quality to it, even as Karp tried to ignore it. And who is the heckler? Props to a guy by the name of Raymond Dowd, D-O-W-D, a partner of the law firm of Dunnington, Bartholomew, and Miller. Longtime civil litigator, Dowd specializes in copyright law, not someone who regularly protests, but who was there as a member of the bar, not as a demonstrator. And he said it was totally spontaneous to heckle Brad Karp. He said, I didn't plan to do it, but I was annoyed and overtaken by the moment that Karp would make these remarks unchallenged in this forum of a room of legal elites, and there was no one to offer another perspective on the deal that Paul Weiss had cut. Brad Karp was not an honoree that night. He was just a speaker, speaking for about 30 minutes, and 2/3 of the speech was basically him defensively saying how great Paul Weiss, the law firm, was doing pro bono. And again, this is after Paul Weiss struck this deal with Trump and his administration, right? And so my hat off to Raymond Dowd for heckling Karp. Karp also saying that he had had a heart attack in January of 2025 and that he had then entered this deal with the Trump administration in March of 2025 and how this whole thing with Trump administration was worse than a heart attack is what he said. Okay, fine. So why do we talk about this? Well, because in the tranche of documents that were just released on Friday, Brad Karp's name comes up a lot. And it comes up because he had a lot of communications with Jeffrey Epstein. And it wasn't just him, as in Brad Karp, it also involved his kid, his son, who was attending Cornell University, or who went to Cornell University, excuse me. And when I read you some of these emails that are the Brad Karp, Jeffrey Epstein emails, some of them raise more eyebrows and more questions than answers. Just gonna say. Okay, so let's get back to the chronology because this is really important, okay? So here's the chronology. The plea deal in Florida for Jeffrey Epstein was when, folks? 2008. That's that sweetheart deal where the Southern District of Florida U.S. Attorney's Office, led by Alexander Acosta, did not prosecute Jeffrey Epstein, despite having a 67-count indictment, blah, blah, blah. In the end, it was only the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office, and Epstein got that bullshit deal where he did like no time and he was on supervised release and he was completely fucking around when he was on supervised release and he was abusing other people and it was just horrible in and of itself. And this is 2008 and it was public, right? His prosecution, everything, this is public back in 2008. And over time it got exposed. So more people knew about it. So it wasn't like it was totally secret what was going on. Everybody knew what Jeffrey Epstein was all about. And this is so important because if you knew what the fuck was going on with Jeffrey Epstein, then why in the hell, if you are the head of Paul Weiss, this esteemed white glove, white shoe international law firm, are you dealing with Jeffrey Epstein? Well, what are the deals with Jeffrey Epstein? Well, for example, emails from July of 2016 where Brad Karp asked Jeffrey Epstein for help in getting his son a job working on a Woody Allen film. I know. I would say it's the jokes write themselves, but there's nothing fucking laughable about child sex trafficking, pedophilia, any of that, right? Okay. July 2016 email in which Karp is saying, hey, can you help my son get a job working on this Woody Allen film? The emails also revealing, and these documents revealing that were released by the DOJ, that Karp dined with Epstein several times at Epstein's home. Notably, let's talk about this particular email. It's bait-stamped EFTA, Epstein Files Transparency Act 2492991. Dated July 22nd, 2015. Again, after the sweetheart deal for Epstein, and everybody knows that he's kryptonite, right? And toxic and horrible. And before Epstein got indicted by the Southern District of New York, that was July 6th of 2019. So that's an 11-year window, 2008 to 2019, right? And there's a whole lot of Karp-Epstein interaction going on. Let's go to this July 22nd, 2015 email exchange by and between Jeffrey Epstein and Brad Karp. At 5:49 a.m. on July 22nd, which was a Wednesday in 2015, Brad Karp had to start his day with an email to Jeffrey Epstein. And this is what it said. Jeffrey, I can't thank you enough for including me in an evening I'll never forget. It was truly, quote, once in a lifetime, end quote, in every way, though I hope to be invited again. You are an extraordinary host, and your home, ... 3 exclamation points. Thanks again. See you soon, Brad. To which Epstein responds at 9:53 a.m. You are always welcome. There are many, many nights of unique talents. You will be invited often. I don't even want to speculate what Jeffrey Epstein meant by nights of unique talents. That in and of itself is disgusting. I'm sorry, but it just is. Okay? So the fact that you have this gushing happening, right, by Karp and Epstein, I'm not even done because I'm still going. Okay? Karp responds, quote, you're amazing and thank you. And then Epstein says, I was just talking to Larry Summers about you and telling him that he needs to meet you when I get back. He said that his wife, Lisa New, used an IP, an intellectual property attorney at your firm, and said that he definitely wanted to meet you in part to ask you to go easy on her fees. Parentheses, I merely transmit, end parentheses. He is really funny and warm. I think you will find him a treat. To which Brad Karp says, thanks so much, Jeffrey. So now Epstein's saying, I want to introduce you to Larry Summers, and I want you to hook up his wife's fees so they're not so expensive for the lawyer she's been using. But he's also dangling in front of Brad Karp, what? More work for Paul Weiss, the law firm. Which I'm telling you, as lawyers, we want big clients. We want big work, right? And so he, as an Epstein, is dangling this in front of Karp. But more disgustingly, he's dangling, quote, many future nights of unique talents, about which Karp gushingly says, you are amazing, thank you. And as a slight reminder, Larry Summers, president of Harvard, big economist. Yeah, issues. Okay, so in addition to that email, there's also the email, as I mentioned, about getting a job. There was also several emails about having Brad Karp's son and his girlfriend go and watch special screenings of Woody Allen's films. There's a July 2015 email about Jeffrey Epstein asking Brad Karp about revoking a woman's visa, unidentified woman's visa. Quote, is it possible for your contacts to, 1, get her current visa status, ? 2, is there a way for us to file something that would revoke a tourist visa, end quote. Karp responded, quote, both good ideas. We'll work on this. And again, the identity of the woman in question is unclear. Now, I want you guys to ask yourselves this, right? It's like, why would Jeffrey Epstein in July of 2015 be asking to get a woman's visa status, the current status of her visa, and to get it revoked? Like, who was Jeffrey Epstein either trying to punish, threaten, manipulate, blackmail, extort? I mean, and I use those verbs, right? Because I stumbled on an email I want to share with you. And on its face, it doesn't look maybe particularly alarming, but when you consider what you know about Epstein and you consider kind of the power that Brad Karp himself has, being the head of this big law firm and having all these resources, and the fact that Karp is rubbing elbows with very powerful people and representing people like Leon Black, who was also a cajillionaire that was in Epstein's circle and was dealing with Epstein and all that other stuff. I want to read you this email. It's bait stamped EFTA 2486589, and it's dated October 1st, 2015. Now, it's sent from Jeffrey Epstein to Brad Karp. And the subject is a mix. And I don't know a mix of what. And the way that I read this email is not that it's an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Brad Karp, as in it begins with, quote, after meeting with you 7 times over the past 3 months. And then it goes on. It's not Jeffrey saying this to Brad Karp. I think it's a proposed email that Jeffrey Epstein wants to send, and he sent it to Brad Karp to look it over, as lawyers sometimes do, right? They review correspondence or whatever to make sure it's legit, kosher, etc. So, first paragraph, I want to highlight something. And here's the language. This is Epstein. I've been trying to come up with a solution that meets both of our needs, yours for security and mine not to be dragged through the mud by the press as you have now often suggested you would do. So it sounds like whomever is the recipient, going to be the recipient of this email from Epstein, has been threatening Epstein to, quote, drag him through the mud by the press. Okay? Now let's fast forward to the second paragraph. I repeat, it is my goal, as it has been from the start, to try to work this out if we can. So this is Epstein telling this person, I am trying to resolve this with you. But then we get to paragraph 3, and this is what I found to be so fucking chilling. Here it starts. This is Epstein. I do not want to have to go to war with you, and I hope you would prefer not to go to war with me. I do not want to take any actions at all that would hurt you. Parentheses. Restrict your ability to get visas where you choose to live, to get any future employment when people discover what you have done, etc. End parentheses. And have a long-lasting effect on your future. We both want you to be free of anxiety, but I am concerned that the same kind of feelings are not shared on your end. At each meeting, you have threatened to attack me, my family, and my business unless I pay you a single lump sum of $100 million. And at the end of paragraph 3, he says, I am coming again to Europe in November. I am willing to try to sit together again if you think productive. Okay. Again, I haven't gone through all 3 million documents, whatever. But this seems to be one of those emails that maybe people really want to pay attention to, right? Because 1, it's to Brad Karp, and 2, you don't really have the identity to whom is the recipient ultimately of this email. And frankly, if it ever was sent, or this message or letter or document or correspondence was ever sent. But this idea that Jeffrey Epstein thought that he could threaten somebody with actions that would hurt someone, including restricting their ability to get visas where they choose to live, to get any future employment when people discover what you have done. I focus on this, people, because I think it speaks directly to the measure and the level of compromat that Epstein had on other people. And that is how this has been kept under wraps for so long, and how a child sex trafficking ring of global proportions could operate for so long and to be done at such a skilled level of secrecy and efficacy. And it's because Epstein held compromat against people of money, means, and power. And because he held that, he was able to hold that over other people. And that's how he was able to get away with what he has gotten away with and what he continues to get away with. Because as we sit here, we still don't have the entirety of the Epstein files released. How do we know that? Because the Trump DOJ continues to invoke some measures of privilege to redact information they're not legally entitled to redact or to withhold, according to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which is a law. And we've talked about this a lot here at the Katie Fang News Channel, but I am troubled beyond explanation and beyond description that this unassuming email from October of 2015 that Brad Karp, the head of Paul Weiss, is getting emails like this. And he's not saying, peace the fuck out, I'm not dealing with you anymore. No, because in the next year, he's asking Epstein, bro, can you hook up my kid with a job on Woody Allen's film? And then we also have the following. Just a few more things I stumbled on I wanted to share with you. Check this one out. Email from November 1st of 2017, because yeah, we're still going on, right? We're still dealing with Epstein, right? This is EFTA, Epstein Files Transparency Act, bait stamp 967807. Jeffrey Epstein to Brad Karp, Wednesday, November 1st, 2017, 5:13 p.m. Quote, next few are going to be wild. Brad Karp responds, I can't even imagine. To which Jeffrey Epstein says, Charlie Rose. Brad Karp says, that doesn't surprise me at all. Epstein says to Brad Karp, the Pope wouldn't surprise you. Now, the Charlie Rose reference in this email from November of 2017 is the Charlie Rose scandal, wherein we know that Charlie Rose was accused of sexually harassing several women, and that led to him leaving CBS, right? So, look, the fact that the Pope wouldn't surprise Brad Karp, as in the Pope doing some type of sexual wrongdoing wouldn't surprise Brad Karp, leads me to believe that Brad Karp has a pretty high tolerance level for weird shit sexually. I don't really know, but this email also doesn't sit well with me whatsoever and suggests that there's a level of intimacy in terms of knowing each other's proclivities between Epstein and Karp about which we don't even really know. Now, look, as far as 2018, we still have documents showing Epstein in October of 2018 asking Brad Karp's help to resolve a dispute with Leon Black over legal fees, right? So that was still going on. And then just 3 months before he was arrested in 2019, Epstein hits up Steve Bannon. And I have been screaming about Steve Bannon sitting for a freaking depo because Steve Bannon needs to end up in front of House Oversight to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, because the fact that Steve Bannon's name has been showing up so many times and pictures of him are everywhere and he has unanswered questions is just fucking ridiculous. But in 2019, April 7th, 2019, remember folks, Epstein gets indicted July 6th of 2019. April 7th, 2019, this is EFTA 5099648. That's the bait stamp, right? Epstein hits up Bannon via text and says, you got to help Brad Karp get into Augusta, the golf club. And there's a whole lot of back and forth that is just dumb about that. But why is Jeffrey Epstein trying to help Brad Karp get into Augusta National, the golf club in Georgia, and asking Steve Bannon to pull strings? The fact that Steve Bannon can pull strings to do that in and of itself probably doesn't surprise me, knowing the history of Augusta. But the fact that this is happening literally just a couple of months before Epstein gets indicted suggests what? We don't have to be a fucking Sherlock Holmes to know that Epstein's trying to hook up either his friend or Brad Karp, or trying to do something to still be, right, in connection with or something with Brad Karp. I mean, look. This is the stuff that we finally get to see. And it may not be as bombshell as some other stuff, but this is the stuff that when you consider the totality of the circumstances and you consider this powerful law firm within 9 days of being threatened via this executive order in March of 2025, bending the fucking knee when other big law firms have not, like Sussman Godfrey. When other big law firms have not taken the knee, why would Brad Karp at Paul Weiss do this? I don't know, because Brad Karp knew he was going to be all over the Epstein files coming out, huh? Or maybe because Brad Karp knew that Trump knew stuff. I don't know, right? But what it suggests, though, is there is a measure of wealth and power and influence, and that these people are traveling in circles where they are in rarefied air. And they think that their shit don't stink. And they think that they can do these things and it doesn't have harm. Be mad, be outraged, and demand accountability. We're going to continue to push for the release of the entirety of the Epstein files because this is not it. This is not even close. But when stuff like this comes out and it kind of collides with my world, I think it's important. I think it's important for people to stop and ask themselves why. Why would these law firms bend the knee, and why would the people that head up these law firms not take a stand and fight Trump? You can fill in those blanks. Katie Fang here. We launched the Katie Fang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.